Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. We are continuing on with our series where we're working in Azure DevOps. We have created a project, we've developed a website, uploaded that code to a repository. We did skip a step, which is branch policies. I'll get into that later. Last video, we followed this tutorial on creating a static web app. And then using Azure DevOps Pipelines to deploy that web app to the static web app service and in an automated fashion using a CI/CD pipeline. The last thing that I didn't do was clean up resources. I did that after I shut off the video, and that entailed deleting the resource group, including the static website. So that concludes this portion. And so we're going to continue on now with creating a YAML-based build pipeline. So the tutorial kind of had us create, a pre-formatted one. So what we're going to do is open the pipeline, click on Edit, and basically all it did was deploy to an Azure static web app. So what we're gonna do is add like a artifact. So in the process of these pipeline deployments, there's really two methodologies. So there's a build of an application. In the case of a website, it's not that a build; it's just static website. What we will get into eventually is more dynamic HTML using probably PHP is my guess. We could do a Java app. We could do Spring Boot. A lot of different capabilities. Just to keep it simple, I'll probably stick to PHP because it's more easily understood, I guess, is what I would say. A static website won't do us any good when we get to that point. But what I want to do is highlight the difference between a build and a deployment. So to facilitate a build, what we're going to do is zip up the file, the website files. And to do that, we're going to use a particular YAML task. So I'm going to, after we deploy the site, actually I'll do it before. What we're going to do is add a task to archive the files. So we're going to create a zip artifact of the website code. We're starting in the build directory on the agent, the build agent that we've chosen. In this case, it's the Ubuntu latest virtual machine image hosted by Microsoft. /s identifies the source code that gets downloaded. So on the agent, when it does a build, all the source code gets put into /s. We don't want to include the root folder in the zip file. We're using a zip type, and we're putting it on the build artifact staging directory. That is a predefined variable. I'll put this link in the show notes, but there is a website, a Microsoft document that shows all of the predefined variables, and agent build directory is one of them. And then build, you have this artifact staging directory, and then there's also a build number. And those are the things that we're using to generate this file name. So we're putting it in the artifact staging directories, and we're using, actually the build ID is going to be the name of the file, .zip. And if there's an existing archive that is there, we're saying, hey, replace it. There shouldn't be any. This system cleans itself up, but I don't want to have any overwrite issues or anything like that. So we're just going to say, hey, if it exists, yeah, just overwrite it. And so we're changing the pipeline, and we have it triggered on any change that happens to master. So when we click save here to add this capability to our pipeline, it's changing this Azure Pipelines.yaml file in the repository, and it's going to execute it. So let's save. I'm not going to put any fancy comments. We just made a change. And now it doesn't look like it's doing anything, but if we click on this build, it's actually executing because we made a change. And what we're going to find is the job is waiting on a build agent. It found one, checked out the code, created a zip archive of the website. And there's the comments. So here we started with it captured all the files. It put them into the build number 40.zip. It stored them and created that zip artifact. Now, trying to deploy the Azure Static Web App. This, I can tell you that this is going to fail. The reason that's going to fail is because I deleted that resource group. I deleted test 1, 2, 3, 4, and I deleted the web app. So it doesn't exist. It's trying to deploy to something that just doesn't exist. So it's going to fail. And that highlights a problem here. We've combined our build and our deployment into one pipeline. Typically, we want to separate those out, or at least have different stages or some kind of separate environment capability. So on top of that, one of the things we want to do is we want to build this environment dynamically. So the tutorial walked us through manually creating this static web app, but we don't want to do things manual in a CI/CD pipeline. We want it to do that. So how do we fix that? Let's go here, back to our pipeline. And so we know that what the code that we added, archiving the website, worked. That functioned correctly. Deploying to the Azure Static Web App failed because it didn't exist. So how do we create it? So I have over here a Azure Resource Manager template deployment that that we're going to use to create the environment that we need. So let's start out with, before we go there, publishing the artifacts. So we created a zip file, but we didn't publish that artifact to our as an artifact inside the pipeline. This becomes important when we start doing stages. It's not so important right now, but I'm going to do it anyway. So let's go in here and add that portion. So we're publishing the artifact. I want to highlight this display name. That doesn't typically. Let me do this. Let me do this real quick. So where do I get this information from? Right, I'm copying a predefined text document that I've already written, but I want to show you guys where I'm getting this from. So publish build artifacts. Right, here is the task that is built into the tool. So it starts out with the build artifact staging directory. We would that's the path to publish. We call the artifact drop. That's just default with Azure, and we're publishing it to Azure Pipelines. So if I click add, you can see it basically adds the exact same information. The thing it doesn't have is this display name. This is a best practice, I will call it. And I think it's a great idea to add that display name, and we'll see in a little bit why that's so important. The only thing we don't have here is publish location to the container. And let me pull up the settings again. I want to know why. Tabs are off. There we go. Settings. Pipelines. Okay. All right. So I guess I just removed it the last time I touched it. But we want to add that in. Let's do that. Let's line up this display name. And we will remove this because it's just bogus last time. And it doesn't look like this is YAML structure. Tabs are off a little bit. It's better. So, all right. So we've got the archive, creating a zip artifact, and then we're taking that artifact from the artifact staging directory, creating an artifact called drop, and putting it in the Azure Pipelines container. We're still publishing to the Azure static web app, and we know that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is remove that, and I'm going to go back to my example. We're going to do this Azure Resource Manager deployment. Oops. And post that in there. So what is this doing? Number one, it's configured for a service connection that we've established. So this is the subscription ID for my subscription. This is the a resource manager connection we've created. What that does is it links Azure DevOps with resources inside of Azure that we can deploy. So the action we're going to do is we're going to create or update a resource group. The resource group is called test1234. That resource group must exist. I don't believe it will create it, but it is going to use these files. So before I move forward, let me go in and create the resource group. I'm okay with manually creating resource groups that we're going to kind of use as a container for things. But what I don't want to do, and I'm going to use East US 2 because that is the location that has, actually it doesn't matter. We're using Azure App Service. Get that resource group. So I don't mind manually creating resource groups. That's basically a container where you can apply permissions and give people access to things. In the case of like a development team, you may give some people, like a senior developer, write access to that resource group, and then other developers you may give read access, so you'd be able to control things that way. We created the resource group. We know that that's going to work. What we haven't done though is this this Azure deploy.json file. So we're using the location East US. But what is this thing, Azure deploy.json? So out on this, and again, this link, Azure Quickstart templates, I will put that in the show notes. But they have these Quickstart templates that allow you to build Azure resources in an automated way. So this particular template deploys an app service plan and a basic Linux web app, which is kind of what we want to do. So we're going to use this Azure deploy.json file. I'm going to copy the contents of that. And in our repository, click on repos, open a new tab. And in our repository, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it Azure deploy correctly .json. Create that file. I'm going to paste the contents of that in there, and we can go through this, but basically this is all the JSON and the parameters that are needed to identify to Azure Resource Manager how to deploy the environment, right? And these are parameters, the top here, these are parameters that we can specify to uniquely manipulate this template so that we can deploy things differently, right? So we can choose to override the resource group. We can provide a SKU. In this case, I've already used in my subscription. I happen to know that I've used all the free subscription. The free capabilities in my subscription. So I have to use the B1 value. So we're going to modify that inside the next file that we manipulate. And so this is not an ARM template discussion, so I don't want to go too deep into this, but ARM templates, this is identifying the different resources. So there's an app service portal name and the parameter, the location. Then they specify a parameter here for app service plan portal name. And the format is app service plan dash, and then the parameter we give it for the web app name. So if I gave it test1234, it would be app service plan dash test1234. In this case, I'll talk about it later, but the web app name must be globally unique across Azure. So test1234 is already in use. I can't use that. I know that's been a common theme throughout this whole demo, but it's just not a valid unique name. So what I'm going to do is put my last name in there And so the name will be Correa test 1234. And that should be unique enough. So then it tells us, or I should say, we identify it as you requiring TLS 1.2. The FTP state requires FTP-S. So we have to be secure FTP. The branch is master that it's utilizing, and then it specifies the web app name for the website. So I know it looks complicated. It's not that complicated, but all of this is defined in the the JSON requirements for ARM templates, and that's a whole nother discussion. But suffice to say, this basically tells Azure how to deploy the resource. That's really what it does. Now, the other thing we have to do in this GitHub repository is there's a parameters file here. So we're going to copy that. We're going to create a new file. Azure deploy.parameters.json. Spell that right. That's good. Oops. Commit this one first to master. Now that's going to run a build, which is going to fail, but right. Let's do this again. New file. Azure deploy.parameters. Okay, create that file, paste the information in. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is add another parameter. Here. And I'm going to specify, let's open up the Azure deploy file. And what we want to specify is this SKU. So we're going to say SKU, and the value is going to be B1, which is basic, instead of F1, because I've used up all those free resources. The other thing we're going to specify the value here is, I'm just going to put my last, for the 3 letters of my last name, or test 4 should be enough. And we're going to commit that file. Go back to Azure Pipelines. Actually, I don't want to change it there. Let's go here. That one. All right, here's we're modifying the, and so we've specified the Azure deploy.json and Azure deploy parameters. The deployment mode is complete, which means it's going to redeploy all of the infrastructure. It's not going to do, the other option is incremental. I'm not a big fan of that. So let's save this Azure Pipelines.yaml file, which should trigger a build. We've got a couple builds running here. I know that they're failing because they have the old, see, they're still trying to do the Azure Static Web App. So we're going to allow that to fail. Should happen soon. And I want to go back to this. Let's go back to pipelines. Let's refresh the files. So again, I didn't add a display name to this one, so I need to make sure I do that in the future. But you want to add these display names because it makes it clearer what's actually executing inside the job. And you'll see in here, when we initialize the job, that those display names show up in here, so you know kind of what's going on. This one just says it's an Azure Manager, Resource Manager deployment because we didn't give it a display name. We'll do that in the future. But you see that we checked out the code, we created the zip artifact, no problem. Everything's good there. We published that artifact as drop. And so that is now a resource that the pipeline can utilize. It detected the Azure deploy.json and the Azure deploy parameters file. It deployed the Azure resource, and there we go. So now, if we go into this resource group, we'll see that we actually have a web app. Let's refresh. So right now we only have an app service plan. I think it's creating the web app. I guess it's done. So let's go back to this pipeline. Did I miss a step? Edit this. And let me go back to my text file. Here it is. Deploying the Azure App Service. So we created the App Service plan through the template deployment, but we didn't create the actual web app. So let's do that. I'm going to add, before I forget it, I'm going to add the display name. Put it in quotes, and this is Azure App Service plan. And then this is deploying the Azure App Service itself. So we're going to create a app name called Korea Test 1 2 3 4. Let me make it consistent. I'm going to make it Core Test 1 2 3 4. And then it's going to use that package, that zip package that we created in this build artifact staging directory, and it's going to extract that zip file to that location. So let's save this. Back to our pipeline, which is now executing because we made a change. What I want to point out is previously, because we manually created that Azure App Service, Azure website, excuse me, the static website, we could continuously deploy our code to it. But if we tried to redeploy, if we had built this to redeploy, excuse me, to deploy the static web service, if we didn't use an ARM template, it would say, hey, this already exists. You get an error. What we're doing here by using the Azure ARM template is we have created what's called idempotent code. And what that means is it will pick up wherever it left off. So for example, it exists today. Oops. Resource should exist before deployment. Yeah, I thought it was supposed to create that in the template, but it didn't. There it is. Interesting. As I was just talking about idempotent, so we don't get errors, we got an error. Let's see if maybe there was a timing thing. One of the things I want to look at is, did the code deploy? So let's pull up the website and see if our website is published there, or is it the default Azure website? I think it just took time, which means what we're going to have to add to the pipeline is a check to see if the resource is deployed before we deploy our code. Or we can add a, you can go the cheap way and add like a timeout, or a wait. Let's see what the website says. Wait. Delay task. That's so this is taking a while. I'm going to add to our pipeline a delay task. Let's do that. Let's take it out. Let's make it I'm going to do 3 minutes. Let's see if that works. This still has not come up. Not a fan of that. Oops. Okay. Come on. I still think it's building the website. What I'm going to do is change that to 5. So let's do that. And save. Hit the branch. It's going to run that build again. And failure. Did I jack up something? Let's look and see. All right. Let's use the example here. Yeah, looks right. Everything's lined up. Looks good. One of the things that I use as a standard. So the logs show minutes file. That is say that. Let's go back here. Okay, yeah, so it didn't deploy our code. It's just the standard website. So let's save this delay. See if that will execute successfully. Still complaining. Not valid for the given job target. Let's go back. Not understanding what it's complaining about. Up correctly in the YAML. Don't have jobs set up. We're just doing straight tasks. Let's run this again. I don't know. Job target. Let's that up. And like active troubleshooting. It's an agentless task, so you can't. Here we go. Instead, do this and cancel that. Replace this. All right. Structure. What's it playing about? Indent. Now it's so let's put well, it's not tasks. Let's do type right. Azure PowerShell. Let's do that. Not Azure PowerShell. Let's do inline. Let's do this. Okay. And that. There. That's more like it. Okay. Add this display name. Move this other PowerShell. Like that more better. All right. Let's save that. Go back to pipeline, which is executing now that we have valid YAML. Back here, hit refresh, still no website, that's good. Refresh, we've still got our website and our app service. It is deploying the app service plan. Now it's deploying, oh, it's delaying, so it's going to wait 5 minutes and then deploy the app service. So I don't know if we need to do that every time, but the way it looked. One of the things I want to show you is within the web app, there's this SSH development tool. So if you click on that, it gives you an option to open another window or tab to get an SSH console already authenticated using your credentials into the host that is managing your site. So if I do an ls, we see there's nothing there. If we go back to a directory, two directories, the home directory, there we are. The site, there's www.root. And there's one file, and that is hostingstart.html, which is this page. So that's good. Our pipeline, so this is waiting 5 minutes, which is going to take forever. Seem like it takes forever. Let's go back to our pipeline here, or excuse me, our boards. And so we created this website artifact. No issues there. Was the zip file. And we're adding the deployment to the Azure App Service to the pipeline. We did that part, and that has worked successfully. And now what we're doing is, so that's what we're testing right now. 2 or 3 minutes, it should execute, and you'll be able to see the results of that. So if I show you this app service plan, talk about what I was doing before, if I click on scale up, there are two options, well, there's several options, but the free option here is F1, the basic option is B1, and it requires you to pay $12.41 or approximately a month for it. The reason I had to select B1 is because I've already used all of my free pricing tier applications. You can only have, there's a limit to how many you can have in a Visual Studio subscription, because they don't want you to host all kinds of free websites. So that's why I had to switch it, and this is where it pertains. So if we go back to the website, the web app, and let's check the pipeline, still waiting. No content because we haven't deployed it yet. But let's, since we're waiting, let's look at the GitHub Quickstart templates that I was talking about. So there's a whole slew of them in here. If you click on this, the different folders in here, you click on 100 blank template. It shows you this is just a blank template. This is a, it just has the structure of an ARM template. If we click on, go back to the Azure Quickstart templates, there are, here's the quick starts. There's a whole slew of templates for every kind of resource you need to deploy. If you're deploying a virtual machine, depending on the type of virtual machine, they've got all kinds of capabilities and examples. If you need a virtual machine that's domain joined, here's the template that it would be required to do that. Here's the parameters file, and if you use Bicep, this is a Bicep file. That Bicep is a intermediate DSL or domain-specific language for creating these ARM templates using PowerShell. But really great resource to take a look at. Looks like we're still waiting. And there we go, it just finished and it failed. Waited all that time for no reason. Oh, it's core dash test 1, 2, 3, 4. I mistyped it. That's stupid. All right, so let me go back and remove that delay. I'm not going to remove it actually. What I'm going to do is comment it out. I was mistaken that it needed time. I called it, oops. Let me go back to the Azure parameter. Yeah, that's the problem. Or I could change it here. Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to leave this alone. I commented out the delay. Before I save it, let me change this file. We're going to end up having two running, but well, this is going to automatically kick off a build, and this is going to automatically kick off a build. I think we can look through that. So this is the one where I changed the parameters file. This is probably going to fail, but it's going to wait 5 minutes. Let's see if I can kill it. Cancel. Yes. All right, good. Canceled. So now the other one should be executing. When it initializes the job, we should not have the delay task commented out, but it's deploying the app service plan, app service. And close this. We should be here. Let's hit refresh. I created a new one for dash test. So I'm going to delete this one. No, I'm going to delete. Well, I mean, I'm not going to delete anything yet. Let it run. So it's creating new resources based on the new naming. But I think core test is what's correct, which means there's going to be a new web app as well. So yeah, let me delete this app service plan. Yes. Deleted itself. Excellent. So it recognized that it wasn't necessary and it removed it. That's the nice thing about using form templates, I think, is it looked at that and said, hey, this is not supposed to be in this resource group, so let's remove it. So if we look at the deployment, I think it'll save it. Back to the resource group. More stuff. All right, so we deployed the app service plan. Now it's deploying the app service itself. I'm going to close this because we won't actually change. That should be the URL. It is. Deploying the zip file. That's a good sign. Our SSH session got it's disconnected because that service got removed. Here, the SSH session for this particular app service that just got created. Authenticate. And it's still deploying. Okay, updated the app service config. It might restart the app service, which might cause this SSH session. Boy, here we got an application error. That's because it's restarting, I believe. It's restarting now, so I'll refresh that. Let's refresh our SSH session. Yeah, it's still restarting. Yeah. All right, so it looks like it deployed our code. You can see our files are there. Let's look. Yep, it succeeded. And so now, there's our deployment. There's our website. Click on the info page, pulls up our kitty. If we hit default page, it goes back. So now our site is deployed on Azure, Azure Web App, and we've done that through an automated pipeline. It's kind of our goal. Go back to our requirements. So the next step is to create stages, but this video is going a little longer than I'm used to. I'm going to end this video and we'll do the stages in the next one. And I want to thank everybody for showing up and watching the video. If you got value from this, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.